So okay, what kind of game is the Firefly Diary? It's got tags as strategy, adventure, puzzle platformer, and anime on Steam. Well, only one of those hit the main genre of the game, and it only gets it half right. Because the Firefly Diary is a puzzle game, pure and simple. Sure, Mion is asked to climb boxes and maneuver through the environment, but platformer invokes games like Mario and Shovel Knight, and frankly, this game is much more a puzzle game than anything else. And let's start with the controls, because it'll set the tone for the gameplay section. This control set has you control little Mion via Lumen, as he directs her with which way to go and what to do. Now, remember this was a Vita game, meaning that in that version, you could move Mion via the touchscreen, although it also had a control set that didn't require it. Here you have the option of using a combination of the mouse and keyboard and a controller. And these two control sets do work a little bit differently from each other. In the case of the mouse, you'll click and drag Lumen to move the green Firefly. This will cause Mion, who listens to his orders, to move towards the place you're dragging to. So if he's to the right of her, she'll move to the right. If he's above her and there's a ladder there, then she'll grab the ladder and start climbing it. You can interact with objects by clicking on them, and clicking on Mion herself will make her stop and crouch, in case you want to manipulate the environment and not have her wander off into certain death. But the game also does give you the option of a controller, but the click and drag is replaced with an automatic move, like you're always dragging. And while yes, the game is playable with this controller variant, it puts you at a disadvantage. Specifically, if you need to move your cursor across the screen, Mion takes a little longer to react. This is because she'll think she'll need to do something different for a brief second, as the cursor moves across her in the vertical direction. In short, go with the mouse controls if you do play this game. Now, you may ask what I played with. I played with the controller. Wait, Dragnix, you just said, yes, I know what I said. The reason was for footage purposes. With the mouse, that cursor appears on screen, and that's not visually appealing. I'm really confused why they didn't hide the cursor and use a Lumen as the mouse cursor himself. Now, you'll see me use a mouse once in a while, but more on that later. The problem that develops with the controls early on is that you'll have to get used to them and its associated quirks. As you are only guiding Mion as opposed to directly controlling her, if the game is unable to determine if you're telling her to go up or to the left, then she may not do what you need her to do. When you need her to stop pushing a box, for example, and go in the other direction, there's a specific sequence that always worked for me, but it wasn't necessarily obvious at first. I had to do an upward arc thing as pictured here to consistently get her to leave the box alone, or she'd start pulling the box with her. You do get used to it after a long period of time, until a new mechanic shows up, and then you're back at square one. Now for the actual gameplay part of things. The game is a puzzle game at its core. Find a way to navigate little Mion through a various amount of hazards trying to kill her. The puzzles will range from running away from large monsters trying to devour your shadow, more on that in a second, to running through dangerous assembly lines that may crush your bones at any second. And given how the player is supposed to be a father figure to little old Mion, you'll get that devastating ting of guilt every time she dies and the screen fades to black. And expect that to happen a lot. Now there's one trick that the game has up its sleeves, the use of shadows and Umbra, Lumen's partner in crime. See, you can activate certain switches and traps if you go into the shadow form with the Firefly. Now this form does follow a set of rules. Basically, you have to have a path to the activatable in question via the shadows. Your Firefly shadow can jump from shadow to shadow if it's really close to it or touching it, although it has a certain distance it can go from Mion before it stops reacting. Now in theory, this does open possibilities for some interesting puzzles. Having to connect the dots of where to place Mion or particular objects so that you can hit the needed object via a shadow is actually a fun mechanic. When the game is at its best, it allows for a little bit of timing and action along with it, as you have to figure out on the fly how to get Mion from one place to another, and how the layout of the environment plays to those strengths. In all, The first third of the game does a good job of introducing you to this mechanic, and you'll enjoy them, at least at the start. But sadly, this is where the Firefly Diary starts to fall apart. First, when it comes to good puzzle design, you want the player to be able to figure it out without knowledge of the puzzle beforehand. If the player feels that the puzzle is unfair or required information that he did not have until he failed it, the puzzle will just frustrate him in a bad way. If the player feels like he knows what to do, but the game is actively causing him not to do it, they'll get frustrated more. And let's just say, a good amount of the puzzles in Firefly do just exactly that. Do nothing but frustrate. Let's start with the fact that some of the puzzles are very unforgiving and require absolute precision in order to get through them. And that's absolute precision with a set of controls that are a little bit loose, as I mentioned before. For example, I know that I need to shadow form and activate the platform here